Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book, and I'm super excited for tonight's event. We're having some tech difficulties with Valerie. We're able to hear her, but we're having issues getting her camera working. So we're going to get started, and we might just be interviewing her voice and not getting to see her. But I still want to be able to let her chat about the book. So I'm gonna get us started. And we will go with it and see what happens. So thanks everybody for joining us this evening. As I said, I'm John. I'm the event coordinator at the store, and I am also the resident cozy reader at Murder by the Book. So just to kind of give you an idea what's been going on at the store, we have just been able to start hosting in-store events again in January, which we're really excited about. We're still doing a mix of in-store and virtual. We haven't started doing hybrid where we're broadcasting in-store stuff yet, just because it requires some extra equipment and a couple extra sets of hands that we haven't quite figured out yet. So we're kind of doing one or the other. Next up, we're going to have Alice Feeney in the store tomorrow. I'm so excited. Next Thursday, we're going to have Deanna Rayburn in store for her newest release, which is a contemporary standalone for her. Also wanted to mention, if you are cozy and traditional mystery fans, there was a new Miss Marple short story collection that just came out yesterday that features 12 new stories by different authors. On September 15th, we're going to be doing an event in the afternoon called Marple Celebration, which Good Housekeeping has put together. We've got info about that on the store's website. That one's going to be a crowdcast event that you'll have to register for. And then two other things I wanted to mention before we get into tonight's authors. Richard Osman, who wrote the Thursday Murder Club series, his third book comes out. We're going to have signed copies of it, and we're going to be doing a virtual event with him. So definitely check that out on the website. And then also for our cozy readers, Amanda Flower is going to have her first historical in her Emily Dickinson series out on September 20th. I'm going to be chatting with her too. So lots of great stuff coming up. Hopefully you guys will come back for all of that. While we're chatting this evening, if you have questions for any of our authors, either about their newest books or their previous series, please post those in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will get to them in a little bit. But I'm going to get our authors out and get us started. Let me get their bios pulled back up since I was clicking around looking at dates. First up, I'm going to bring out Laurien Berenson. Oops, I clicked the wrong button. There we go. How are you tonight, Laurien?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you? I'm delighted to be here.
Thanks for doing this with us.
It's my pleasure, believe me.
So Laurien's newest book is Peg and Rose Solve a Murder, which is the first in the Senior Sleuth Mystery series. Laurien is an Agatha and Macavity Award nominee, winner of the RT Reviewer's Choice Award, and four-time winner of the Maxwell Award, presented by the Dog Writers Association of America. She and her husband live on a farm in Kentucky, surrounded by dogs and horses. Next up, I'm gonna bring out Valerie last, just in case things miraculously start working before we get to her. So next up, I'm gonna bring out Daryl Wood Gerber. How are you tonight, Daryl?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
Nice to see you, Laurien. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Daryl.
So Daryl's newest release is A Hint of Mischief, which is the third in the Fairy Garden series. Daryl Wood Gerber is an Agatha Award-winning, nationally best-selling author of the Fairy Garden Mysteries, the French Bistro Mysteries, and the Cookbook Nook Mysteries, as well as the Cheese Shop Mysteries under the name Avery Aames. She also writes standalone suspense novels and the Aspen Adams novels of suspense. Prior to her career as a novelist, she was an actress with roles in television shows including Murder, She Wrote, and she wrote for the popular TV sitcom Out of This World. Originally from the Bay Area, she now lives in Southern California, where she likes to cook and garden and spend time with her frisky Goldendoodle named Sparky. We're also joined tonight by Darcy Hannah. How are you tonight, Darcy?
Oh, I'm just so excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
So Darcy's newest release is... there we go. Murder at the Blueberry Festival, which is the third in the Beacon Bake Shop series. And Darcy Hannah grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. She's a graduate of Indiana University. Indiana University, and currently lives in a small town in Michigan with her husband, 3 sons, and 2 dogs. She's lived around the Great Lakes all her life and considers them a source of inspiration. When she's not engaged in a rollicking family adventure, walking her dogs, or working at the historical Howell Carnegie District Library, she's either baking up a storm or hard at work on her next Beacon Bake Shop Mysteries. And now we're going to bring out Valerie. Valerie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so we're going to go, since we can't see you, but we can hear you, we're going to keep going so that way we can at least we can hear you talk about the book. Does that work?
That works for me. Sorry.
It's all right. I'm sorry we couldn't figure out what it was. Valerie's newest book is 2 Part Sugar, 1 Part Murder, which is the first in the Baker Street Mystery series. Valerie is the Agatha Award-nominated author of screenplays, children's books, and cozy mysteries, including the Baker Street Mysteries, the Mystery Bookshop series, the Dog Club Mysteries, and the R.J. Franklin Mysteries. Born and raised in South Bend, Indiana, she currently resides in Georgia, just outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, with her poodles. She is a member of Mystery Writers of America and a lifetime member of Sisters in Crime. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to start us off real easy. We're going to start with Laurien. Can you just tell us a little bit about your new book?
My new book is a spinoff from my series, the Melanie Travis Canine Mystery series, which was about dog shows. And I took 2 of the characters from there. One is Peg, who's a woman in her 70s, and she's a standard poodle breeder and a dog show judge. And her sister-in-law, Rose, who is a former nun, now married to a former priest. And the 2 of them have been enemies for years. They've hated each other for years. And Rose decides that now, at this age, it's really time for them to bury the hatchet, hopefully not in each other. And she wants to mend this relationship. And she asks Peg to join a bridge club with her as her partner. And Peg does not see how this is going to work, but she decides, all right, maybe we can do this without fighting too much. And they join a bridge club. And then after the second session that they go and play bridge, one of the other club members is murdered. And the 2 of them join together to figure out who done it.
I think I see a video for Valerie. I'm going to bring her on the screen. There she is! Yay! We figured it out. Good.
I'm the only one who hasn't held up my book. I think I've got to do that. There we are. There we are.
Love it.
Perfect. Okay. So, Valerie, I'm so glad that we got this to work. So, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about 2 Part Sugar, 1 Part Murder?
Sure. So this is the first book in a new series. I'm really excited about it. It's a culinary cozy about a young social media influencer who knows absolutely nothing about cooking, inherits a bakery, and when her live stream wedding is, interrupted because the groom ditches her, then she's just looking for a place to hide out. And she finds out that she has inherited a bakery from her great aunt Octavia, a house in Southwest Michigan, and a 250-pound English Mastiff named Baby.
So next up, Darcy, can you tell us a little bit about your newest one, Murder at the Blueberry Festival?
Yes. So my whole series, again, I'm set in Michigan too. We're in a charming little town in northern Michigan called Beacon Harbor. And so the whole premise of this series, this is the 3rd book in the series. The premise is that my protagonist, Lindsay Bakewell, was a Wall Street investment banker. And something disrupted her life, and it had inspired her to do a little maybe drinking and shopping on the internet. And the next day she woke up and she was the owner of a lighthouse in Michigan. So her dream, her last name was Bakewell, and baking used to relax her, or did, but her dream was to own her own bakery. And so she just decided, to embrace it. And she has a bakery in a lighthouse. So in this 3rd book, Beacon Harbor is this charming little small town. And also Lindsay has a 2-year-old Newfoundland, so another big breed named Wellington. And so in this 3rd book, it's set in the summer during the Blueberry Festival. And here in Michigan, we love our blueberries. So I was very excited to get to write about one. And Lindsay is on the chamber committee. And pretty early on during the festival, things start to go awry. There's a prankster in the midst, and some terrible mishaps happen. They're kind of funny, actually. And so it's gathering more crowds, and things are escalating. And Lindsay is well aware she's going to be next. And, then stuff happens. So it's a fun background setting. So.
Perfect. And so, Daryl, can you tell us a little bit about A Hint of Mischief?
Sure. This is the third in the Fairy Garden Mysteries, and the Fairy Garden Mysteries are set in Carmel, California. If you haven't been there, it's a real town on the coast of California. It's beautiful. It's a little charming community filled with courtyards and fantasy, and it's a perfect place for a fairy to reside. In fact, a couple of fairies. Sparky, you need to be quiet, bud. Don't know what my dog is doing over there, but he's trying to protect me, so I apologize if he yips. Anyway, Courtney is the owner of a fairy garden store. And for those of you who don't know what a fairy garden is, it's gardening for small pots. For example, this is a teacup fairy garden. So it has little fairy figurines in it, and then you can put plants and things and stuff around it. Well, you can do that with bigger ones. You can do it under a tree outside. And Courtney decided to open this shop after being a landscaper with her father, because she was not happy being a landscaper. And when she decided to open the shop, she encountered Fiona, who is a fairy, and she's a fairy in training. She's been kicked out of the fairy kingdom because she was an imp. And so she's in California. She's a righteous fairy. And in order to earn her adult wings and be won back into the fairy kingdom, she has to help humans solve crime. And in this book, there is a birthday party for 40-year-olds, sorority sisters, and oops, one of them dies.
So I want to talk a little bit about, we were going to theme this around food and pets, but I also want to talk a little bit about kind of the hook. And for those of you who are watching, when we talk about cozies, kind of the hook is, potentially the job that our amateur sleuth does. And so we all have kind of varied ones here with us. And I want to start with you, Daryl, because you have one that I've not seen before. So what made you want to build the series kind of around fairy gardens? And was that something that you were interested in before, or is it something you started researching when you started the book?
So it happened like about 6 months before I decided to start doing it. I went to a Renaissance fair and I fell in love with this woman, I fell in love with the art she was doing, which was fairy gardens. And I thought they were so magical, and I had to go make one. And I found a shop that's about 90 minutes from me. So I drove down there and I walked into the shop, and it's filled with all these fairy figurines, and outside there were plants and pots, and I've always been a gardener, but the elbows and the shoulders start to go. But potting, doing small gardens I could do. So I went home and I made one, and as I was making it, I went, what if I created that shop I just went into and made it into a shop, in some place, and a fairy? And it's like, I don't think there's any fairy in any of the, the magical paranormal. We had ghosts, and we had, magical cats, and we have skeletons and even goblins, but there were no fairies. And I've always loved and treasured the idea of fairies. And so I decided to risk it and make a real fairy who would be a fairy sleuth and be a sidekick. And so that was the inspiration for it. And I have now made lots of fairy gardens.
Nice. And so, Valerie, I want to talk about yours, because I love the premise of your character has inherited this bakery that she knows nothing. She knows nothing about this family relationship. She knows nothing about cooking, or really kind of how to do anything for herself. So what made you want to approach it that way, as opposed to like a character like Darcy's who loved baking?
So I think it was being home for 2 years in the pandemic and watching a lot of outtakes of cooking shows, so I enjoy cooking, and I watched a lot of cooking shows. I watched a lot of TV while I was home for, a few years. And I thought, watching these outtakes, I'm just like, oh, how cool. It would be really, really interesting if there was a character who was really into the social media aspect of things, but not so much the baking, because the funny thing are the outtakes where things go wrong, where, the stuff falls on the floor, or, you forget something and something explodes. And so I think that's what really put it together for me, is wanting to just sort of, have that contrast. But I think it was just watching a lot of really bad outtakes on the internet and on television of these outtakes.
Yeah. And I have to say that I thought that you did such a good job of putting kind of all of the social media stuff in the book in a way that felt organic, but also didn't feel like, I'm trying to say this, but it didn't feel like a way that it was forced in there. Like it seemed so true to that character, and it didn't seem like you were just putting social media stuff in there to have it in there. I thought you worked it in there all really well.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And so then on the other end of the spectrum, Darcy, as I mentioned, and in your bio, you mentioned that you have a love of baking. Your character's name was Bakewell. So in her past, she'd already loved baking. So what made you decide to want to do baking for your hook for your cozy?
It was so funny because I started out in the historical fiction. I started writing that first. And when I wrote a mystery, I didn't realize I'd written a cozy mystery and I didn't have a hook. And that's when my agent said, you need a hook. So going through the hooks, I mean, this is honestly how it happened. And she's like, oh, and she was kind of throwing out ideas and knitting, fiber arts, whatever. And she hit food. And I'm like, well, I can do food. I like food. I don't care what it is. So I also love lighthouses as well. And I spend a lot of time on the water. And Daryl, I just have to say, I hike a lot and I have found fairy doors in trees. And I love it. I take pictures, but it is like the coolest thing. So I'm sorry, little side there for the fairy
they're
door.
everywhere. Yeah.
I love it. I think that's amazing. But for me, it was something that I had experience in. I put the love of my lighthouses with the love of baking. I also, my younger brother owned a bakery when we were in our 20s, like just on a whim he bought it. I had no idea what we were doing. So, I mean, it was kind of baptism by fire as far as the baking, but yeah. I like combining food with stories. And of course, dogs. I have, dogs as well. And the lighthouse, it is haunted as well. That's another thing that we kind of like. That same brother who owned that bakery was a paranormal investigator as well. So we used to, walk around graveyards at night. It's crazy things, but you know what I mean? So try to keep it a little bit realistic with my ghost in the lighthouse, because every time I go into a lighthouse, I ask the docent or whoever's, leading me around, I'm like, so who still lives here? And they always look at me like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I go, you know what I mean. So then they pull me aside like, well, sometimes we hear footsteps. And so there were some really cool haunted lighthouses in Michigan as well as other places. So I thought I'd just kind of put it all together and offer recipes for baked goods as well. So I think people like to eat when they read.
Yeah. And so Laurien, let's talk about yours, because yours, while one of the characters shows dogs, it doesn't quite have kind of that obvious hook because it's more kind of sleuths of a certain age. But so what made you decide to want to spin off the other series?
Well, I had started the dog show series, and I started that because I was showing dogs. I was breeding and showing dogs, and my mother had done that. My grandmother was a dog show judge. And it just seemed like such a natural idea for cozy mysteries. I read cozy mysteries and I was just dying to write one. And then actually, before I wrote the first book in the series, Pedigree to Die For, a show dog was stolen and taken from its breeder. And the breeder was rather desperate to get it back. And I ended up writing up the story for the New York Times. And I thought, this is the way to start the series. And that series revolves around the dog show world. And Peg, who is one of the characters in this book, is a breeder of standard poodles, and then becomes a judge as she gets older. So I think really I started with the dog hook. My life was so much about dogs, and the other series was about dogs. But it was almost time to graduate, if you will. And A Pedigree to Die For came out in 1995. It's almost 30 years old. And I'm a lot older than I was when I wrote it. And so I started sort of in the mind of the younger character, Melanie Travis, and grew into the mind of Peg, who is, in her 70s. And I think there are not that many books that have older women as heroines. It's sort of this forgotten, men are believed to age better than women. Older women are overlooked, which I mentioned in the book, a couple of times, that someone does something, but nobody really notices. The older women are kind of marginalized. And I really like the idea of stepping into that niche and taking two older women who are both very active, very smart, still thinking, still doing things. They both have careers. Rose and her husband run a women's shelter that they have opened in Connecticut. And so they're very active women, but they are women in their 70s. And I just really like, exploring that.
It's really funny how it seems like we go through, I mean, like with any trend or anything in publishing, it always seems like we kind of swing towards one extreme or the other. We had, Miss Marple on one end, and then you had like Stephanie Plum on the other end, and it seems like we just swing back and forth between, all of a sudden we have like younger sleuths and we have older ones, and it's nice to see now that there's kind of like more variety in age ranges of stuff being published, and it's not just one or the other. So I also wanted to talk about our furry animal sidekicks. I think Daryl, you might be the only one on the panel who has a cat, because everybody else's books all have dogs. So you have a cat.
This is Pixie.
Yeah.
Which is a perfect name for a cat in a fairy garden.
Exactly.
It's interesting. You mentioned that, because dogs, as much as I adore my dog, you have to pee them, walk them, and do things with them. And cats, you can sort of let take care of themselves. So, but I laugh because a friend of mine wrote a cat into her book as a neighbor's cat that she was taking care of. And she forgot to feed it for like 5 chapters.
No.
She had to go back through the book and make sure that she'd done what she was supposed to with the cat. So, Pixie goes to the shop every day. Pixie takes walks. Pixie does things and loves the fairy. Pixie can see the fairy. So that interaction has been fun for me. But I have not written a dog into my books for that reason. My fans like my cats. So I have cats in all my books.
Yeah. And so and this will be for everybody, but we'll keep going with Daryl. So as you're writing, do you find that kind of the pet stuff, does it happen organically while you're writing, or do you feel like when you're done, you need to kind of do kind of a pet pass to make sure that you've mentioned them and that they're actually a part of the story?
Yeah. I think that's fascinating. It's a great question. I think that it happens organically, but I also, because I outline and I structure, I make sure that I have Fiona mentioned here, and here, and I have to know where she is. If she's not in the shop and with Courtney, where is she? So I have another thread showing where she is, and I need to know where Pixie is. And Pixie interacts with the people on the patio, and when there are teas, she's out there, saying hi to people and jumping in their laps. But she's never part of solving any of the problems. She's just there as comfort. But that interaction with her and the fairy, and her and the people in the shop, that matters. So I make sure that I know where she is, and she's plotted into my outlines, so I know where she is at all times.
And how about you, Laurien?
I think in my books, it happens a little more organically. The dogs are real characters. They're there. Peg, in this book, she has 3 standard poodles, all of whom she has bred. 2 are finished champions, and 1 she's still showing when she's not busy judging. And she lives with these dogs, and she's also a widow. Her husband had died 10 years earlier. And I sort of talk in this first book about how lonely she is, that this really wasn't entirely the life she had envisioned to be living right now. And she talks to her dogs all the time. And although in her mind, they talk back. I mean, she hears what they're saying. I shudder to use the term dog whisperer, but she gets dogs. She understands them, and they understand her. And she will talk to them. And in fact, she and Rose have this conversation because Rose is kind of afraid of dogs. And when Peg says something and the dogs, run up the stairs and go away. And Rose said, well, what happened? And she said, well, they knew we were going inside. I told them. And she said, well, how did they know? And Peg is just like, they know what I'm thinking, and I know what they're thinking. So and my dogs, it's funny that you should mention that, Daryl, because readers have written to me and said, yours is the only series where people have dogs and they have to take them out to pee. And I was like, yeah, but I live with dogs. I had 6 dogs when I started writing this series. So like that, they need water, they need to pee, and poodles, they need to be brushed. Stuff has to happen.
Yeah,
so
my Sparky knows what I'm talking about all the time.
Well, you see that, but that's exactly it. So I think mine are very much characters in the book, and they all have different personalities and different things that they do. And they never solve any mysteries, and they don't do heroic undog things, but they're always there, and sometimes they move the plot forward a little bit.
And how about you, Valerie?
I think similar to Laurien, my dogs are, inclusion is much more organic. I think it's just because I have dogs and, I think about my character and how her life with dogs is, similar to my life with dogs. And so I thought about her moving to a new city, moving to some place she's never been. She doesn't know anybody in this place where she's just inherited this bakery and the dog, and she's never had a dog either. So how would she interact with this? She doesn't have anybody else to talk to, so she talks to Baby, and she's like, "Is this make me crazy? Do people talk to their dogs?" And so, I think it was just sort of, this is how I interact. I mean, I talk to my dogs, and I'm not going to tell you if they talk back, but they seem to understand me. I'll put it that way. Yeah. So I think that it's just living with dogs. You kind of just sort of know what needs to happen. And I notice that I do tend to say, okay, we get up, Baby goes and takes care of business. And then, so those necessities, they have to happen. Yeah. And I really think that it's just a part of dog ownership. And one thing I really like is when the people who are writing books, including dogs, have dogs, because they tend to include the details. They include, the fact that if you have a poodle, you're going to have to comb that out, or you're going to have to cut off the hair. They're not dogs that you're just going to be able to leave, because I have 2 poodles. You cannot just leave that, or they're going to be a tangled mess. So I love including facts. I want people to know, yes, Baby's a big dog, but don't necessarily be afraid of a big dog, because they are very gentle, but they drool. So you are going to need to deal with drool. So if you don't like drool, don't get a English Mastiff. Or if you don't want to brush out your dog, don't get a poodle. Mm-hmm. So making sure people understand the facts about what it means to be a dog owner is important to me.
Yeah. And how about you, Darcy? Because you also, especially in the first book, we're writing about trying to, your character's opening this bakery and worrying about trying to keep the dog out of the bakery with the health inspector. So you have a lot of those kind of practical elements too. So how does it work for you in the writing process?
Yeah, well, I like everybody. I would love a cat, but I'm allergic. So I've always owned dogs, and I even had an English Mastiff growing up, and I had a Newfoundland. So I know all about the drool firsthand. Big dogs, but they are gentle. And right now I have a Springer Spaniel and a Golden Retriever, and my Springer is about ready to bark at my son who's upstairs. So I might have to mute myself if that happens. But my real life is dictated by dogs. And so writing about dogs is like all of you who own dogs, it's natural. First thing I do in the morning is let them out and feed them cookies, and then we take long walks. That's how I find my fairy garden doors in the woods. So we have a lot of time, and we also live by a lake. So my dogs are always swimming. They're always wet. Same with the Newfoundland. And I chose a Newfoundland not only because I love them. I would have one, but they are so drooly and big. I've my 2 dogs are combined into one big Newfie, here, but they're just great water dogs. And so for a lighthouse, it was a perfect fit because they're, water rescue dogs. They're just great, gentle giants. And I thought it would be a really good ambassador for the lighthouse. And of course, it's Lindsay's best friend. And like me and like all of you, we talk to our dogs a lot. I even have to chew gum when I walk with my dogs because I'm talking so much. And I feel like I'm crazy. So I'm like, oh yeah, talking to my dogs. It's the gum.
Yeah. I talk to my cats all the time. I have 2, and we've had them for 4 years, and one of them went to the vet a month ago, and when they came home, something happened, and all of a sudden they hated each other. So we have been trying to reacclimate them for we're finally at the point where they will spend a couple of hours in a room together. But I got home with my husband, I had a long talk with Juliet today about how she needs to be nicer to her brother. I'm I think it's working. I think it's happening, whether she's paying attention or not. We've had the conversation.
You suppose if you'd taken them both to the vet, it would have been fine. Maybe the fact that only one went, and the other one thought, this is my house now.
Yeah, so then we had
a trade.
Yeah, so then a week and a half later, when one of them had a follow-up, the other one needed to have just a regular checkup. So we both took them at the same time, thinking they'll smell the same, it'll be fine. No, so it's been like literally 6 weeks of keeping them in separate rooms and like reacclimating them, which is really fun when you bring a new kitten home. It's not fun when you've had cats for 4 years that are all of a sudden like, I don't like each other.
That is. Yeah, I don't understand cats. I don't understand why that happens.
I don't either. And that was my vet. I was trying to explain, and she's like, "You're trying to use logic. They're cats. Like they're cats. That's why this is the way it is. They're
and that's why I have dogs."
There's a new show on called The Inner Life of Cats, I think it's called.
I saw that.
Check it out because supposedly you get to know all about how cats think by watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So complicated.
So complicated. Luckily, they, like I said, they're getting into the point where like tonight, I think we're going to actually leave them out overnight in the same room to see what happens. So we'll see. Wish us luck.
Good luck with that.
So the other thing I want to talk about is food, because you all have some kind of food in the book. Laurien, we'll start with you because you don't quite have recipes in the back, but you do have, you have Rose, who's trying to grow tomatoes, and you have Peg, who's always serving cakes. So can you talk a little bit about the role of food in your book?
Well, it's funny, and I know that recipes and food are such a big deal with Cozy Mysteries, and I am just not a cook. So not a cook. I mean, I will eat celery before I'll try to cook something. But obviously people eat, and Peg just has this massive sweet tooth, and she always has cake in her house. And when people come to visit, she gives them cake. And it's gotten to the point where sometimes people are just coming to visit to get the cake because they know that she's going to have it and it's going to be there. It's the first thing she does. And Rose, having lived as a nun, she's still, even 10 years out of the convent, she's having a hard time breaking out of that way of life. She's not a person who generally indulges herself. She doesn't know what to make with Peg, Peg does whatever she wants whenever she wants to do it. If she wants sugar, she's having sugar. And Rose spends a lot more time worrying about what other people need than she does. And she and her husband have opened this women's shelter in what was a house, and it has a tiny little backyard that is just dirt. And she decides she's going to plant a garden. And she's never had a garden, and she doesn't know how to do it. And she buys 16 tomato plants that she's going to because she figures half of them will die right away. This is her thought. And she thinks, the other half won't make, so she really has no clue what she's doing. But there are two women who are staying at the shelter at the time, and they help her, and they get these tomatoes in the ground. And actually, she spends the entire first book. First, she waters them too much, and she's trying to nurture them, and she has no idea how to nurture plants and make things grow, but she's determined to get tomatoes. And actually, I've already written the second book in the series, and she has many, many, many tomatoes. So she's giving them to everybody.
Okay.
So there's food in the book, just not recipes.
Just not recipes, yeah. And how about you, Daryl? Because you have recipes in the back of yours as well.
Yeah, so I've gotten known as a culinary mystery author, starting with the cheese shop and then the Cookbook Nook, and everything's always had food. The French Bistro Mysteries had food in them, and so for the fairy gardens, it was like, well, how can I get food in there? I'm working toward fairies and magical and flowers. What can we do? And so they have teas every Saturday at the shop out on the patio, with fairies flying around that not everybody can see. So, they do book readings, and so she has teas. And so we focus a lot on the different cookies and scones and things that you might serve at a tea, or a lot of my recipes. And I love to cook. I love to bake. I'm gluten-free, so I try a lot of my recipes out on other friends, and then I make them for myself gluten-free. And then there's a cafe across the street, which is the boyfriend now, by the third book, the boyfriend. Okay, spoiler alert for the first book. That the guy in the cafe that she's known since high school has a wonderful cafe, and he makes beautiful food and delicious food. In fact, he caters the food for the party that's in this book, in A Hint of Mischief. And so I use his recipes too, and those are usually more savory. And it's nice to shake it up. But yeah, I include recipes. I love to cook. I'm a fairly good eater. And but I've cooked all my life. I catered for a while, so food comes naturally to me.
Yeah. And so, Valerie, we talked about kind of how you approached the food as the character not knowing it, and kind of doing the kind of the oopses that happen in the kitchen. So, at what point did you know that food was going to be a part of this new series?
I knew from the beginning I wanted to do a culinary cozy and include recipes. And so I like to bake. And so, from that standpoint, I knew I wanted to include food. But I think it was, just seeing all of those crazy outtakes and how things go wrong that I really wanted to, I just thought, oh, how funny. I mean, I laughed hilariously, at some of those. And I thought that's what I wanted to include, as opposed to everything going well and going right all the time. How cool to have a bakery and you have no clue how to even turn on a gas stove or, make scrambled eggs. So.
Yeah. And how about you, Darcy? You've mentioned that you also have a love of baking. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what the food means for you to be able to include it in the book?
Yeah, it's I've always enjoyed baking, and in fact, when my kids were growing up, I wouldn't let them buy store-bought stuff, so I would just bake everything. And so friends would come over, and I just became known as like the baker. And then we did have, the 2 years of the bakery, which was won't do that again. But again, that was like, Valerie, you talk about like the mishaps we didn't know we were doing, and so. My brother would call me at like 3 a.m. and say, or not 3 a.m, but he'd be like, I need you to come in at 6 a.m. because I have like 2 wedding cakes and whatever. I'm like, I don't have frost wedding cakes. And he's like, well, there's a book. Like, learn. It was a lot of fun. But I've baked for so long, and I do cook. I cook all the time, and I have giant children, 3 sons, and so I made a lot of food in my day. And so cooking. Was, so like I said, the cozy mystery genre was kind of new to me, but I loved it because you can talk a little bit more about the food. And like you, Daryl, I do try to, because there's a lot of sweets in the book. It's a big, I try to throw in something like a meal or something savory, just to balance it up, and sometimes even an alcoholic drink. So,
nice.
But yeah, so it just was something I really enjoy. The recipes I use are either my own or family recipes, or something that I've looked at and tried and made. And you know how you can twist everything and add things to it. I think that's the fun of baking. It's not, it's not really cut in stone. You can, it has a lot of leeway, so it was just a lot of fun to do.
Perfect. So as for anybody that's watching out there, if you have questions, I've got a few quick fire questions for everyone. But if you guys have specific questions out there for any of them, please post those in the chat and we'll get to those in a bit. So we're going to start with Laurien. Not counting your own, which we said you don't have recipes in your own books, but have you ever made a recipe from somebody else's cozy mystery?
Yes. Well,
Yep.
yes, I have, because I like Aunt Peg. I like sweets, and the fudge mystery. Cozy Mysteries. Oh my God! And now I can't think of who writes it.
Nancy Coco.
Yes, Nancy Coco. That's of course. That's exactly it. Yes. So if anyone is going to tempt me, it's someone who's making fudge. So yes, I have.
How about you, Daryl?
Yeah, I've made a lot of recipes from other people's books. Krista Davis comes to mind because she just is a wonderful cook, and we were friends. We were friends on Mystery Lover's Kitchen, our blog, for so many years. And so I see recipes in books, and I'll say, oh, I want to try that. I'm good on making fudge myself, so I don't need Nancy's recipes. But we've talked about them. But I will try a cocktail every once in a while. I think those are fun to try too. And why not? I'm not going to make every recipe in a book, but certainly, they're fun to browse. Just cookbooks themselves are fun to browse. That's why I wrote the Cookbook Nook Shop. And that's because, you get into a cookbook and you can see the historical side, Darcy. You're reading about the historic history of a restaurant or how the cookbook came to be. And I find that fascinating sometimes. So, I read recipes.
Yeah. You, Valerie?
Yes, I have made them, and I've probably made something in just about all of the culinary cozies on my shelf. I'm looking over at them and I'm thinking, man, I think that I first started reading cozies and I liked, these British historic cozy mysteries, and they were always, eating scones. And so when I started seeing the actual recipe for how to make it in a cozy mystery, I'm like, I definitely have to try that. So
Totally.
And you, Darcy?
Oh yeah, when I worked at the library, I would go to Joanna Fluke's new books would come out, and they're carrot cake right on the cover, and I'm like, I have to make that carrot cake. So I'll be reading them, and Krista Davis, I love her books too, and I always make stuff from her, and it always turns out amazing. But I'll read, and part of the joy before I was a cozy mystery writer, I used to love to read them, and I would get hung up on the food because I'm reading at night. It's the only time I have peace, and it's like midnight, and you're like, oh wow, that carrot cake, I need to make that. I wish I had that right now, So yeah. I think it's like tempting. I think sometimes it's cruel and devious that we talk about so much food in our books, but
yeah.
But I think it's fun to inspire people to if you've never made a scone, have a great scone recipe. They're wonderful. It's something really liberating about being able to make your own delicious treat that you can share with friends, and they'll have a cup of coffee or tea, and it's just a very cozy thing. So I really like that about it, and the food, right?
Yeah. And so not counting your own books, we'll start with Darcy and go back around the other way. Who's your favorite animal companion in a cozy series that's not your own?
Oh, okay. So I loved Hamish Macbeth. I used to read a lot of that before I knew what a cozy was. And he had Lugs is his like mutt dog. And I don't know, it was like a cop. For some reason that one sticks with me, but there are lots. I'm going to say that.
How about you, Valerie?
Oh, I think that one of the first cozies that I ever read and loved the dogs was Laurien's, because she had poodles, and that's what we had, toys. And so it was just that instant connection with the poodles. And so I loved it.
Yeah. How about you, Daryl?
So I'm sorry, I'm going to tout Christy again, but I love Trixie and her Paws and Claws mysteries. This is the snoopiest dog in the whole world, and she finds body after body after body. I think that as a Jack Russell, she's just curiously wonderful. So I love her.
That's a good. I just read that. I just read
Jack Russell because I'd shoot it.
Yeah,
so.
I know.
And how about you, Laurien?
Well, it's funny because Valerie beat me to it. I was going to say Valerie's poodles, and once a poodle person, always a poodle person. Yeah. And John, our editor, sent me her first book to blurb, and I started reading it. Went, oh, wow, cool. So it's Valerie's poodles, absolutely.
I love it.
Perfect.
Oh, poodle love, and mine had to start barking.
So we've got a question from Carly. So she wants to know, this is for everyone, if there are any other hooks or settings that you would like to explore in the future. Let's start with Laurien.
I've always wanted to write a historical mystery. I'm not sure if I'd be that good at it. I know I'd have to do a ton of research, and I would love to set a mystery in the Roaring 20s. And that's just always something that's been in the back of my mind. I don't know if I'll ever do it, but it's an idea that fascinates me.
Yeah. How about you, Daryl?
Well, I'm actually exploring one right now, so I'm going to close my lips because it's out there trying to find its way in the universe, but it's something that I'm really excited about. So.
Cool. Fair. And how about you, Valerie?
I would love to do a cozy that deals with codes. I'm really into code breaking and all of the mystery around that. And I had an idea for one, and I also have an idea for a fairy tale cozy I'd love to do. So we need to talk.
Awesome. How about you, Darcy?
Great. I mean, these are all great ideas. I would love to write a Scottish cozy, modern day Scottish cozy mystery.
Nice.
I just think that would be fun. That's something I would like to do.
How about Scottish scones?
Oh, you know it. Gotta have the scones.
So it seems like in cozies that we either get when you start a cozy, you either are going to have your murder victim is going to be dead by the end of the first chapter, or we get to know the victim and they get bumped off somewhere around like page 70. It's sort of it tends to be, to me, I think, one or the other. So we'll start with Laurien. Are you a knock them off immediately, or do you want to get to know the victim before you knock them off writer?
I almost always get to know them. I introduce them as characters, and I try not to make it immediately clear who it is that's going to die. And there was one book that I wrote where apparently everybody fell in love with the character, and then I killed him. And I got a lot of with Death of a Dog Whisperer, and I got a lot of backlash for that. So then the next book I wrote after that, the character, I never introduced the character. He was always in the next room. He was always the main character was always about to talk to him. And before she got to him, he was dead. So I've sort of tried it either way, but generally speaking, it's about page 75 for me.
Yeah. How about you, Daryl?
Yeah. So I'm sort of at the very first, I was committed to the end of chapter 3. Did that get to meet him for about 3 chapters and kill him off. But I find that it's actually a little bit better for the reader if it's more like around page 50 or 60. They do get ensconced in who are all these people, who are the suspects. I try to play really fair and get all the suspects up at the front too, so you can know who they are. But I want you to either care or hate, the victim, so that you can be involved in the process of solving the crime. And if you just kill him, a thriller sort of starts on the first chapter or first page or the inciting incident. But going a few chapters in, I think, is a little cozier, and it gives us this chance to embrace them as people, so that then we either rue them or cheer that they're dead.
How about you, Valerie?
I like to kill them in the first 3 chapters. So you get a little time to get to know them, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
I don't want people to get attached.
And how about you, Darcy?
Oh, I didn't realize that in the cozy mystery genre, you're supposed to kill your person up front or close. And so I get pushed back on that a lot. Yeah, so my goal is to kill somebody quickly, but for me, it tends to be a little further in the book because I like to get started with the story. I like to put it in there. But I just turned in a book today, and when my agent read it, she's like, maybe you should try killing him sooner. So boy, did I think about that and rework that a little bit, but. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think readers mind all that much. I've never really gotten any negatives on that, but it does seem to be something in like with the cozy mystery. I mean, yes, you have to have a body, but I think if we always do it one way or the other, people are going to suspect, because I think some of the fun too is to not know who's going to die. Except for the back cover blurb, they usually say
back cover blurb.
Just give it away. So I'm like, but you know what I mean? So yeah, for me, my goal is to kill somebody sooner. That sound wrong.
There was in 2020 and early 2021, I spent sort of my pandemic reading was I read every book in Leslie Meyer's holiday series, like the whole series. And there's one, I mean, those books are like 197 pages almost to the book. They're all, and like there was one where like it was like a page 120, and it's like no one's dead yet. This is the weirdest thing in the world.
Very good. Okay, good. So it's not a like set in stone thing.
No.
I wrote a cozy where nobody died. I just sort of wanted to see if I could do it, and I had the main character was being stalked throughout the book. And so there was tension, and actually she was shot at the end of the book, but nobody died, and really nobody seemed to notice that there wasn't a dead person. It was
that's awesome.
I don't know, it was interesting. I wanted to see if I wanted to see if I could maintain the tension without a dead body.
That's usually called suspense.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I love about the genre is, we have, a few tropes that you try to hit in every book. It's usually, as we've talked about in a lot of these panels before, it's usually a young woman who's just broken up with somebody who's coming back to their small town. So, and, there are all these kind of like little things that you hit. that a cozy will have a lot of those same elements, but it's always really fun to see how you guys as writers can all take those little things and just change them and still make it a cozy, but then there's just all this other different stuff that you can play with. That's one of the things I love about the genre, is getting to see how each person's going to interpret kind of those building blocks. Since we are getting close to time, I want to ask everybody, and I'm going to put one caveat that you can't mention anyone on the panel's most recent book, but what is something that you've read lately that you loved? Let's start with Laurien.
The Unkept Woman by Alison Montfort, I think.
Montclair.
Alison Montclair. Sorry about that. Wonderful. I love that series.
We're big fans of that series too. How about you, Daryl?
Finley Donovan's killing it. And I can't remember the name of the author, but I read both books in the series so far, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah, El Casamano is the author. I loved the first one, and the second one is taunting me from my shelf. I need to get to the second one. Those are so much fun.
It just starts right where it left off, and it's just so much fun.
Oh,
yeah.
How about you, Valerie?
So there's two series that I love, and I just, whatever the next one, I just automatically order. So I don't even know the exact name, but I love the Gaslight series by Victoria Thompson. And I love the Mrs. Jeffrey series by Emily Brightwell.
Yeah, perfect. And how about you, Darcy?
So I just finished the Diva makes cheesecake. I think that was great. Of course, I had to make cheesecake after that. And then I'm reading one now. It's called Such a Felon, and it's called a Talking Corgi Mystery. And I've never read. It's the first one, so I just kind of go all over the place. I haven't really, read somebody. Well, Krista Davis, I do that, but I've been reading so many authors. I love it, and I just need more time to read. Somebody.
We had a question from Judy. So Daryl, you touched on this a little bit about kind of wanting to do fairies because you were inspired by the fairy gardens, but what was the inspiration for making it in order for her to get her wings that she had to help solve a mystery? Was that, can you talk about that?
You know what? I decided to create the background of this world. And so I was reading on fairies, and there are water fairies and nature, woodland fairies and things. And I decided there would be 4 classes of fairies. I didn't find it anyplace. I made it up because that's what I do. And so there are righteous fairies and intuitive fairies. And I'm going to blank on the other 2, nurture fairies, and then one other. And she's a righteous fairy, and a righteous fairy has to solve problems in order to become the most mature fairy that they can be. And a righteous fairy solving problems, when the queen fairy sent her back to the human world, she said, your problem is to solve problems for humans. And so that gets her involved, and every time she helps solve just little problems, it doesn't have to be murders. Just solving little problems will help her get her wings. And she needs 3 sets of adult wings before she can go back and thrive in the fairy kingdom. So it's my background story that, I'm creating her old language and the little rules and things that they have to do. And I keep a full list because I will forget them if I don't write them down.
So I always feel guilty asking this question because all of you have just had books out recently, and you've just spent all this time working, and we're celebrating the new ones. But I'm sure everybody wants to know what you have coming up next or what you're working on next. So we'll start with Laurien. What's your next release, or what do you have coming up next?
The next book coming out is book number 29 in the Melanie Travis series, and It's called Killer Cupid, and it is set on Valentine's Day. Cute. And that will come out the last week of December.
Perfect. How about you, Daryl?
The next one is A Flicker of Doubt. It is the 4th Fairy Garden Mystery. It comes out next year. And then I also have Poaching the Puzzle, and that's a Cookbook Nook Mystery that will come out in April.
Awesome. How about you, Valerie?
My next book will be the 8th book in my Mystery Bookshop series. Comes out in December.
Yeah. Awesome. And you, Darcy?
My next book will be a Halloween book, Murder at the Pumpkin Pageant, and that comes out next Halloween or next early fall.
Yeah. So I think, Darcy, you are the only one on the panel who is not currently writing more than one series.
I know. I got to get working. I feel so like I know. So that's why when I was, with these ladies, I was like, oh my gosh, I get to do this with you wonderful authors. So yes, thank you for. But it's so much fun to listen to all your writing and all the things that you guys have gone through. It really helps me too. I would, like I said, I'm thinking about doing another one, but I just fitting it in. I'm going to try. Hopefully.
It is sometimes a juggling act, when you have more than one series and you're getting one in and you're editing this one and you're rewriting with this one and you're doing the outline for that one. And it's a real juggling act.
How do you keep it straight? Do you ever
outlines for me?
Okay. Outline. So do you ever mix up the main characters?
Index cards for me.
Names? Okay.
Piles and piles of index cards.
Oh yeah.
One for every character, every book.
Oh, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah. I use Pinterest. I create a Pinterest board for each of my books.
That is smart. Oh my
So if I want to look at, if I need a picture for inspiration or I can't remember what color car somebody drove, I go to that Pinterest board and I can look it up.
That is
clever.
Yeah, very clever. So yeah, I guess I got to get working. So I'm the slacker of the group.
Well, and Laurien, I imagine it's got to be even. Laurien, I imagine it's even going to be even more critical for you with this new series being a spin-off that you have to know where all of the characters are in the timeline, so that way you don't have messing up the timeline in either series.
The interesting thing was when I wrote the first book in the Melanie Travis series, I thought it was going to be one book. I really didn't know. It was very early on. There were not these long, cozy mystery series, and I thought I was writing just a mystery. And it kept going. And I started with all sorts of things that I never really would have put into a book if I had known that 30 years later I'd still be writing them. But one of the things was that Melanie Travis has a son and he ages with each book. And now, actually, all these years later, she was a single mother at that point, but now she's remarried. She has 2 children and her dogs also age. So keeping everybody's, it's not like Sue Grafton and Kinsey Milhone where, the book opens and everything is exactly the same as it has been. It's totally different. Every single book, it's a different season. It's a different time of year. And the people have aged from the book before. So I have giant index cards and every book has index cards and every character has, the dog characters have index cards. Wow. So that, even down to the fact that a lot of these dogs are being shown and it takes 15 points to get a championship. And I have to mark, well, this dog has this many points in this book. And, it's crazy, but, and I have to know where the kids are in school. And yeah, so there's a lot of index cards in my house.
Yes,
that is amazing.
Right. I know that's another thing is a conscious choice to age your characters or keep them Sue Grafton, you're just always, 35 or whatever.
35 with a little black dress. Yeah. And the other thing is, in our cases, as we're hearing, is as often as they grow up, how many murders are they seeing a year?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
If you have them coming every 3 months, so they're only aging 10 years in 30 years, then they've had how many murders a year? And it's the murder she wrote syndrome. So
yeah, it is.
I know. I feel like mine get 3 murders a year. And I know that for every 3 books, they age a year. But because the mystery is set in the dog show world, my characters live in Connecticut. But if you live in Connecticut, you're showing in Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. So that's kind of how I'm trying to get away from Cabot Cove is, not all the murders take place in her backyard. They take place in a lot of other venues, which really helps, I hope.
Yeah, that's because I know I keep wanting to take my characters elsewhere, but I'm told, to keep it close right now. So a lot of death, a lot of murder is going to happen. Beacon Harbor.
Yeah, most publishers don't want you to move them city to city. They like you to stay in the little town you're in. So you're lucky that you can do that, Laurien, because I know one gal, she did antiques and she wanted to move her all over the East Coast. And they said, no, only the one town. Thank you. That's where you have to stay.
That's interesting. I've never, the murders happen in other places, but Melanie Travis, the character, she comes home to where she lives, which is in Connecticut. However, she is talking to this group of people who travel from show to show, and so she goes to other places to talk to them. I mean, she's certainly in her main town, but yeah, nobody's ever told me she can't leave town.
Yeah.
Geez, I had no idea. Well, I've learned something tonight.
That's because you've got all that. You're established. When you're new like me, I mean, there are rules I have to follow.
Yeah.
And I'm learning as I go.
You know, that's one of the things I've always thought was so. I don't think of cozy mysteries as really having that many rules, and I think that is what makes them such a popular read. Is that so many people have approached them in so many different ways, and so people have different expertise and they have different interests, and I think that's really what's so wonderful about the genre is that everybody does it differently. So you don't feel like you're reading the same book over and again. You can fall in love with any number of series because they're all different.
Yeah. I agree.
How about you, Valerie? Because with yours, you have the book series, so she's clearly tied to the area because she's got the bookstore, and we know in this new series she's got to at least be there for a year. So how do you deal with kind of the Cabot Cover being able to move your characters around?
So I think bringing new people in, and the area, the New Aspen, Michigan, is a town. So I think bringing people include people from outside of that. That hopefully will keep it interesting.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so that is going to do it for us this evening. One thing I wanted to mention before we go, for anyone who's watching who is not aware, I should have mentioned this when I did my intro. We do have a Cozy of the Month subscription box. So if you want more information about that, I have dropped it in the comments. It's basically me picking a usually first in series cozy to recommend, and we send them out once a month. We're about to send the September ones out really soon. But to recap, we have been chatting with Laurien Berenson, whose newest book, Peg and Rose Solve a Murder, is out now. We've been chatting with Valerie Burns, who just released 2-part Sugar, 1-part Murder. Daryl Wood Gerber, whose newest release is A Hint of Mischief. And Darcy Hannah, whose newest book is Murder at the Blueberry Festival. If you missed any part of our chat once we are done, Facebook and YouTube will archive it. While you're on the YouTube channel, I've actually created a playlist that has all of the cozy events that we've done in one spot. I think I've gotten to chat with everybody except Laurien at least once while we've been doing these virtual events. So there's other ones back if you want to hear the authors talk about previous books. One of the things that I've really enjoyed about us being able to do virtual events is getting up and running is to be able to do this with cozy authors, because we don't necessarily get to see cozy authors out on tours. As I tell people in the store all the time as they come through, to be able to do it, with them being, $8 or $9 paperbacks, you have to sell a lot of those for publishers to send people on the road. So it's, as a cozy reader, it's so great for me to be able to get to chat with you guys and be able to give people an opportunity to hear you guys talk about these books that they might not if they don't live close to a bookstore where you get to visit. So it's been my pleasure to get to chat with all of you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure too. It's been great for us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good night. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you all